Hi everyone, welcome to Jerematics Tutoring. In this video, I'll be showing you how to factor polynomials of the form ax squared plus bx plus c. Before I begin to show you how to factor polynomials, I need to go over a few vocabulary words that I will be using frequently throughout this video. So in the form ax squared plus bx plus c, there are three terms. The first term in front, with a degree of 2, an exponent of 2, is called the leading term. This is the term that goes at the front. There's also something called the middle term. This is one of the terms that has the x variable and the exponent of that variable is only 1. It's attached to a coefficient. And in some cases, the coefficient is only 1, so you won't see a coefficient, but it's a middle term and the degree is just 1. And the term at the end is called the constant term. This is called a constant term because there is no variable attached. It's constant. It always has the same value. So when I talk about something that's constant, I give an example, something like my name. My name is Jeremy, and it'll never change, as far as I know. My name will always be Jeremy. That doesn't change, it always stays the same. A variable is like your age. It's always changing. So your middle term can change, because if you plug in a value, like say x equals 2, well, you get 12. And as you can see, that's not constant. It changes depending on the value of x. So that's why if there's no variable attached to a number, then it's constant because it's always that number. Okay, so now when you factor these polynomials, the best thing to do is to not really overthink about the x's. The technique that I use to factor polynomials makes it so easy that you don't even have to keep your x's in mind, as long as you've got x squared, x, and then a constant. This trick that I use works every time, and even in my university courses, I still use this same trick. It works every time. This trick will never fail you. What I do is I look at the constant term, the number, which is 8, and then I look at the coefficient of the middle term, which is 6. So I look at 8 and 6, constant term, middle term, and I make a little table. So I write over here, two numbers must multiply to the constant term, 8, and they must add up to the middle term. So this is the standard form that I use. Two numbers must multiply to the constant, and those two same numbers must also add up to the middle term. And what are those two numbers? Well, it requires a bit of mental math, but you just guess and check. That's the best way to go at these kind of problems. So we got 8 and 6. So I'm going to write that down in our table. So two numbers must multiply to 8, and they must add up to 6. Which two numbers multiply to 8? Well, there's 8 and 1, but 8 plus 1 is 9, so it's definitely not 8 and 1. 4 and 2. 4 times 2 is 8. What's 4 plus 2? 6. There we go. We found our two numbers. Our two numbers is 4 and 2. So now I will erase this, and I will show you what we do with these numbers once we found them, because right now you must be wondering, okay, well, we found 4 and 2, well, what do we do with this? Like, what a waste of time this is. But no, it's not a waste of time. You will see that these numbers are going to be our factors, and they will be, they'll be with the x inside the brackets. Just watch. X plus 4, x plus 2 is how we would factor x squared plus 6 plus 8. 4 and 2. You see what happened? We grabbed our 4 right here. Since our 4 was positive, it's a plus 4. We put inside the brackets with our x, and then we grab our 2 right here, and we also put in the brackets with our x, and it's the plus 2. So x plus 4, x plus 2. Did you see how we didn't even have to think about the x's, and that once we found our two numbers that satisfy the conditions, they go inside of each pair of factors with our x. So you see, it's like I just did this, x, x. And then after that, I grabbed each number and I put them with an x. That's exactly what you do to factor polynomials of standard form of ax squared plus bx plus c. This trick, of course, only works when the number in front of x squared is 1. And then in the next video, I will be showing you what you need to do when you've got a number other than 1 in front of the x squared. But for now, I will give you a few more examples of factoring polynomials of these forms, and then after that, will wrap up our short video on factoring polynomials. So as you can see, this trick is actually pretty easy once you get the hang of it. The next example I will give you will be another easy one, x squared plus 5x plus 6. plus 6. So we need to find two numbers that multiply to our constant term. Which one's our constant term? It's plus 6 because there's no variable attached to it. 6 will always be 6. The value of 6 will never change. So two numbers multiply to 6, and two numbers add up to 5. Which two numbers are they? So let's start with 5 and 1. Well, 6 and 1. Does 6 and 1 multiply to 6? Yes. Well, what's 6 plus 1? 7. What about 3 and 2? 3 times 2 is 6. What's 3 plus 2? 5. So those are two numbers that satisfy these conditions. So two numbers that multiply to 6 and add up to 5 are 3 and 2. And now we set up our two sets of brackets. And in grade 10 math, you will always just have two sets of brackets, which is two factors. You'll always just have two factors to deal with. So 3 and 2. So we put x inside of one set of brackets, and we put an x inside the other. Those are two x's, because x times x is x squared. In the next video, I will be showing you how to verify your answers by the distributive property. But for now, I will just show you how to factor them. X, x. And we've got a 3 and a 2 here. What do we do with our 3 and 2? Well, just like in the last example I gave you, since this is a positive 3, you literally write plus 3 with one of the x's. You bring it inside of the parentheses, right? And after that right here, since this is a plus 2, a positive 2, we bring it inside of the brackets and we put a plus 2. So x squared plus 5x plus 6 factored is equal to x plus 3 multiplied by x plus 2. That's how you do that. My next example will involve a negative number, so you can see what happens when you've got a negative number involved. It's actually not that tricky. It just might be a bit more tricky to find the two numbers that satisfy the conditions, but once you do so, it's really the same idea of putting in the brackets with your x, except it's the negative. X squared plus 4x plus 5 minus 5 minus 5. So we need to find two numbers that multiply to our constant, negative 5. Don't forget that negative. And we need to find two numbers that add up to 4. Which two numbers multiply to negative 5 and add up to 4? Well, let's test some numbers over here. Let's go negative 1 and 5. What's negative 1 times 5? Negative 5. What's negative 1 plus 5? That's plus 4. So those are the two numbers that satisfy these conditions. Negative 1 and 5. Because negative 1 times 5 is negative 5. And negative 1 plus 5 is 4, which is your middle term. So let's set up our two sets of parentheses. Put an x in both of them. And now we grab each number that we got over here and we put in the brackets with our x. Negative 1. It's a negative 1, so we carry our negative 1 inside of the bracket. Negative 1. And then we got a plus 5, so now you write plus 5 in the other bracket. And we factored x squared plus 4x minus 5. So that's how you do that one. As you can see, it's not that bad. And then in my next example, the last example of the video, I will be giving you an example where the coefficient of the middle term is negative. Because really, I've given you almost all of the possible scenarios. I've given you one where the middle term and the constant were positive. I gave you another one where the middle term and constant were positive. And then I give you one where the middle term was positive, but the constant was negative. And now I'm going to give you one where the middle term is negative and the constant is positive, just so you know how to deal with everything. So now I will be showing you the last example of this video, which is when you've got your middle term that's negative and your constant is a positive. So to understand what's going on here is we need to think about what's actually going on with these numbers. So what's going on over here is we've got a constant that's positive and a middle term that's negative. Well, if we factor everything, remember that the two numbers that must satisfy the condition must multiply to the constant, and they must add up to the negative. Well, two numbers that multiply by each other gives a positive, and then they add up to a negative. How do we do that? Well, we do this by finding two negative numbers, because the only way you can have two numbers multiplied by each other that multiply to a positive and add up to a negative is two negative numbers, because think about it. Negative 2 multiplied by negative 2 is positive 4, but negative 2 plus negative 2 is negative 4, right? So the only way you can get a negative middle term and a positive constant is if the numbers in both sets of brackets with your x are negative. So we need to find two numbers that multiply to positive 6 and add up to negative 5. Which two numbers are these? These two numbers are negative 3, and negative 2. Negative 3 and negative 2, why is that? Negative 3 times negative 2 is positive 6. And negative 3 plus negative 2 is negative 5. Does this meet our conditions? Negative 3 and negative 2, they multiply to positive 6, and they add up to negative 5. So this works perfectly. So now, just like we always do, is we put our two sets of brackets, and we put x in both of them. X in both of them. And we grab our negative 3 over here, and since it's a negative 3, we put negative 3 inside of the brackets. And since we have a negative 2 over here, we put a negative 2 inside of our brackets. And that's how we factor polynomials of a standard form where a is equal to 1 in the form ax squared plus bx plus c. Thank you for watching, and if you have any questions, feel free to leave them down in the comments below. And if you like my content and would like to stay up to date, then feel free to subscribe.